What's going on, guys? Phil Birch from Unfun Stuff here, going at you with another video that I think will help both new players and honestly old players alike. We're going to be going over a little bit of the basics and complexities of blocking. Now, before we get really into it, how about you guys do me a solid? Go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on, and enjoy the content that I make, guys. Go ahead and take a look at it all. It's wonderful stuff and hopefully helps you guys out. Now, I think that blocking is a very difficult thing to master in the game of universes, My Hero Academia collectible card game. Blocking is something that, though you've been playing the game for X amount of years, X amount of months, for a long time, you can't quite get the hang of what you should and should not be blocking. Um, and I think that that's very valid. I mean, I've been playing the game for a million billion years and I still miss block sometimes, right? Sometimes you don't particularly know what is coming in a turn and you block once out of turn and you end up dying, right? You block one thing you shouldn't, and instead of being able to survive a turn, you've overcommitted your resources and then they kill you with more and more attacks. I'll say that the easiest and most simple way for me to define correct blocking in my I guess viewpoint would be that the most important things for you to block are obviously uh, bombs. You're gonna want to block. They're big moves, right? You want to block something that's doing like 10 damage, right? You want to block anything that has an on hit effect that is very detrimental for you being able to survive that turn. Say something is like, if this attack deals damage, I selectively destroy one of your foundations, and you're counting on a key defensive piece to keep you alive the rest of the turn. And you want to block if the attack is lethal. That's obvious, but that's it's obvious, but right, it's not necessarily codified, right? Like there are ways for you to play around your cards and make gambling plays that if you don't necessarily check poorly, you can survive. In regards to the third one, and I guess we could go over that first, blocking when something is lethal, you definitely need to understand that though you might be in a position for the rest of the turn to be safer if you don't use resources on the current attack, it is obviously very important for you to spend resources on an attack that is going to kill you via enhances on your foundations, responses, card effects on your character that are maybe once per turns that really, really like just allow you to pass a check, right? You don't want to be like, okay, well, I have X amount of cards up and I need to check a 5. Then if you check a 4, you're doomed, right? Where you could have just said, okay, -2 speed, now I only need to check a 3 or something like that. You don't be too greedy with your own card effects when it comes to blocking something that could kill you. There is a time to take gambles, and that's not necessarily always, right? It's not necessarily always the time to make a gamble. When it comes to blocking more stringy filler cards, you have to make sure that you can block it at an acceptable rate. You don't want to overcommit yourself to a card that's not necessarily going to be doing a ton of damage. Say that same attack I mentioned earlier, the if it deals damage, destroy one of your opponent's foundations, only does like 3 or 4 damage, right? And you're at full. You're totally fine, right? You haven't lost your a ton of life this game, and you're just kind of setting yourself up to go on and defend the rest of the turn. Well, say, like I said, this is a key defensive foundation you need. It's a release. You have one release on board, and you're like, well, I really don't want to get destroyed by this guy. I would say that though you want to block it, if this move has 9, 10 speed, or like your opponent really juices it up to try and hit you, like your opponent really sends the house at it, like they put evil gaze on it or something, so now you're punished either way. Obviously, don't waste resources to block something to that extent. You don't want to overcommit on a move that's only going to do 4 damage, because what happens to the move where you can't tap enough cards for their move that does 10 damage or 12 damage or 15 damage or 185 million damage, like Detroit Smash does sometimes. And then third like obviously the most basic and obvious one to me is you want to block something that does like 10 damage. If you can afford to spend resources to block a frog lashing that's for 10 to 12 damage, then obviously you do. All of these points are definitely if you can spare the resources versus like losing those resources, and that's something that I like to refer to as like over blocking. You're either blocking too much for things that don't kill you, so you're tapping too many cards so you can't stop their big move, or you're committing too many resources to a move that doesn't necessarily kill you. So if this frog lashing is for, say, once again, 10 speed, and you don't have very easy reset for speed or anything like that, then maybe it's worth it for you to take that 12 damage instead of committing your whole board and not knowing what's following that, right? You don't necessarily know if they're going to keep playing these big moves, and they might be easier to block down the line. Maybe this is the only frog lashing they can make 10 speed. Maybe they have wasted too many of their resources on this single move, and now you have the ability to block the rest of their string because they can't put speed on it. So that's like what I would like to refer to as an overblock, right? If I have a 25, 26, 20 even health character, and I'm just taking 12, and that's my first damage I've taken, I shouldn't feel good about it, like going into the rest of the turn, because yeah, my opponent might have more moves that they can throw for big damage. But also, health isn't something you get to take with you into the next game. You don't get bonus points for how much health you have at the end. So like overblocking can be something as simple as my opponent threw out just a super basic move, 5 damage, super basic 5 damage move, and it doesn't have any added benefits. Maybe it's just like, I don't know, it's just create capture net, right? And they've already gotten the stun off of it. They've already gotten like to build the card. You couldn't stop those things, right? But now they just are presenting a 4 damage move to you. And yeah, it's super easy to block. It's very easy to block that move. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their string doesn't have things that are harder for you to block. It doesn't mean you should keep a card in your card pool to attempt to block this move just because it's easy, just because it's slow, because then you can get punished later down the line. And I'm not saying that obviously you'd want to never block or anything like that. It's just you have to be conscious of the game state. You have to be kind of thinking about what your opponent is doing and if their intentions are like to attack, to really push in, to really send it on you on this turn, or if this is just like a little poke that you can get away with blocking, that you aren't going to get punished for blocking. And it's that give and take that makes blocking, particularly in My Hero Academia format, so hard, because there's a lot of decks that just want to throw out like every deck wants to kill you in one string, really. It's a very stringy format. We're all trying to search for our best hand and just kind of throw as many attacks as possible in a turn in the most optimal way, keeping the most cards ready. Which makes some cards super innocuous into what they're doing. Is my opponent throwing Back Alley Haymaker because they plan on killing me this turn, or are they just trying to draw a card or build a foundation? Is the same thing with like capturing that. Is my opponent throwing Frigid Heatwave and Asui as a lead-in because they don't have anything else? Or because they want to like draw 2 cards and build? Like what is really going through the mind of my opponent when they're throwing cards that just look like those gap filler cards, right? The ones that aren't the big bombs, the ones that aren't the necessarily like do something cool when it hits, but are like the necessary building blocks to a good deck anyway. That's the tough stuff. Now, I kind of want to go into, I guess, decks that should be blocking more and decks that really shouldn't be, and how you can get punished in different ways for doing so. So a lot of your aggro decks in the format are relying on your opponent doing less damage to you than you do to them in a given turn, right? Because the cards you're holding aren't necessarily going to be your foundations. You're looking for a nice like turn 2, turn 3 kill, and you're probably building your foundations every turn. You're holding on to your attacks, you're holding on to your actions, stuff like that. And you don't necessarily want to use your valuable resources, right? Your attacks are limited. You're not always going to draw them. You're not always going to have them. You don't want to check them, stuff like that. But blocking with them means less damage you're presenting to your opponent. So a deck like Tokiyami really wants to try and survive more on his character enhance, where maybe you block one thing in a turn, tap your character, and you're just trying to -1 them into oblivion. Maybe that's how you want to play your deck, and that's fine. As long as you understand that there are times that you're going to have to block with your aggro decks, and it's easy. You're going to have to block sometimes. You're not always going to be able to be the one that's aggressing 24/7. You're going to have to hope sometimes you draw into more attacks. And the opposite can be kind of said with defensive decks, right? A deck like Kirishima wants to block a lot. Tons of things. I love blocking with that character. It feels so good. It feels so rewarding because you're still trading your resources around. You don't really feel like you're overcommitting anything. You're not tapping too many cards. And it feels good to just be blocking with a character like that. But at the same point, you have to be able to kind of flip it around, right? You have to be able to, as the defensive deck, hold on to some of your resources at times and use that life total as a resource, right? You want to be able to hold the cards in your hand to attack with potentially on a backswing if your opponent overcommits to something that can't really kill you. So you get to use, like we talked about earlier, health as a resource. Health is your biggest resource when it comes to blocking. Not the cards in your hand, it's how much life you have. Because blocking is important to save you from the last bits of damage. But characters like Nomu have 1,000,000 life. Characters like Kirishima, 26 is a lot of life you can lose before you die, right? You get 26 life to spend, and then you have 1 point you have to defend. And if there's anything you're going to learn, and I hope that you understand from this game, and from this video particularly, is you're only blocking 1 life. At any given point in the game, you are blocking 1 life. You have to save 1 life to win the game. Which is why it feels so bad when you leave your opponent at 1 and they kill you, right? Because you're like, oh, I felt so close. I got so close, and I just need 1 more point of damage somewhere. Because 1 isn't 0. 1 is not 0, guys. Everything involved with blocking is potentially to save you 1 life in the long run, right? There's going to be some games when you die by 100. There are going to be some games when you die by 1. There's going to be some games you die by 2. There are going to be some games you don't die because you are at 1 or you're at 2. Or sometimes you're at full health, right? Sometimes your opponent can't establish a really good string and you are able to decipher that they aren't going to kill you and you are able to block their moves, right? It's a big, not necessarily a big guessing game, but like to parallel it to almost like to parallel it to a real fighting game, right? You do have to kind of guess what your opponent's intentions are. And yeah, in actual fighting games, usually those unblocked hits lead to like a big string of unblocked moves. But like you're basically trying to guess the mix-up, right? You really want to know if the basic intention of your opponent's first or second move is to kill you with more moves down the line, or if those 2 moves are something you can block. Are you able to get away with saving yourself some life? Do I have to spend 10 life now to save 15 life later? It's really tough. But I think that with practice and like understanding the intentions of blocking and how blocking can really benefit you in certain matchups, you're really going to start to like crush through people. Because there's a big difference between somebody who can block efficiently and somebody who cannot. And it feels really like honestly crushing to play against somebody who's good at blocking. It feels awful because you don't know, you don't feel like you can get anything through, or the things you are getting through don't feel meaningful and impactful. And yeah, you might be playing close games against them, but you'll find that once you're close to like winning, suddenly you can't get any damage through. So yeah, guys, I think that basically how I would like to encompass the whole video. We had the 3 things we want to block. We want to block our big bombs. We want to block the moves that are very disruptive to us if they hit. And you want to block anything that's going to take you below 1, obviously, right? Guaranteed block those 3 things, probably, right? Like you can take you have to block the last one for sure. You don't want to die. Dying sucks unless you want to just go to game 2 and then fuck it. I guess have fun. Don't overcommit to blocking things if you have life to use. If you have life to spare, don't spend your whole board trying to block 1 move, because that means they're probably going to kill you with the rest of their moves. And like, be sure to use your health as a resource, and be sure to maximize the usage of either your aggro decks blocking occasionally or your defensive decks blocking less occasionally, so that they can hold on to cards to beat your opponent with, right? Make sure you're using your attacks in an efficient way on defense if you have to, I guess is the main point of that third one. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully this video is informative for a lot of you. If so, leave me some shout outs in the comments, man. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what else you guys want some help learning with, some help getting better at, some insider information on the game. You know, like what does Phil think? What does Phil think about, I don't know, this, that, or the other? Help me with that. Help me help you, gamers. Anyway, dudes, Phil Birch once again from Unfun Stuff. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I will catch you guys next time. Adios.